All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Canada is the Rocky Mountains. Canada is Prince Edward Island. Canada is the country made for love. Canada is La Belle Province. Canada is the Yukon mine. Canada is a country full of love. We have love for our neighbor of whatever creed or color. We have love for our cities and our valleys and our plains. We have a voice that is calling, telling all the world we're willing to welcome them to this great land. Well, that's what Canada is. Canada is the Rocky Mountains. Canada is Prince Edward Island.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we will cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And speaking of St. Catharines, if you're listening to us on AM 1220, that is Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, that broadcasts right here from St. Catharines, Ontario, and stream us around the world on classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV as well. Oh, geez, the news these days is filled with Trumpisms. Yeah, Donald Trump did what he said he was going to do. He's added a 25% tariff on, steel and aluminum. And of course, you know, the people in the United States, they never use that, do they? Oh, yes, they do. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of days. We still have approximately 3 weeks left on the first pause of the tariffs that were supposed to be implemented on February the 1st. We'll see what happens there, but we already know by now that President Trump does things that he wants to do when he wants to do them. And after all, that's what you can do when you're a legend in your own mind. But it has an effect on Canada. It's got an effect on other countries around the world. And this is what we're going to be talking about this hour. I have a good friend of mine here in studio with me. Hans Schmidt is his name, and Hans is a former member of the Canadian military. He's been all over the world, and as always, Hans, nice having you with us. It's great talking to you, and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for bringing me on the program, Rob. About myself, I'm going to try and keep it in a summarized fashion.
Okay.
Having joined the Canadian Armed Forces, basically, after I finished high school and started college, I got to back up. I was born in Toronto, and at 18 months, I was taken over to Germany by my grandparents, and I was raised in Germany. And I came back to Canada at age 7, didn't speak a word of English. My first mother tongue was Italian. My second mother tongue, if you want all purpose, because I went to school over in Germany, was German. And then I came to Canada at age 7, and that's where I had to learn English. Went through public school in Toronto, high school, and started off college, Centennial College, working for my aviation certification. And then I started my pilot's license, and I wanted to become an airline pilot. That didn't pan out, so I saw this recruiting venture, and I decided I'm going to go and join the Canadian Armed Forces, which I did. With the Canadian Forces, that sent me all over the globe, basically. Started off my career as a logistician and supply, and wound up with 2 service battalion of the 2nd Special Service Force, which was inaugurated in 1977. With the 2nd SSF, I wound up going up on Northern Vikings sojourn sovereignty mission that we had up in the North Pole, and that started off from Ellesmere Island, also Churchill, Manitoba. And we stopped off in Thule, Greenland, which, of course, today Trump is saying he's going to take over Greenland and use it as a strategic defense point. I can understand why, because it does cover the Northern Passage, which we trekked across ourselves during our sovereignty mission back in 1979. Then after the SSF, I wound up going in the Air Force, did my stint there at Canadian Forces Base Trenton, Ontario. And then after a year there, I wound up going over to Germany with the Canadian Forces Europe with the 1st Royal Canadian Horse Artillery in the QM stores there. Spent 5 years there in Europe, and then back to Canada, where I was an instructor at the Canadian Forces School of Administration and Logistics. Then was commissioned, and from my commission, then went out to Chilliwack, British Columbia, from Chilliwack back to Borden for intensive logistics officer training, after which I then wound up going to Canadian Forces Base Shiloh, where I was in the quartermaster with the 3rd Royal Canadian Horse Artillery. Upon my tenure completion in Shiloh, I wound up in Kingston with the 1st Canadian Divisional Artillery headquarters within the 1st Canadian Div HQ. And there I was the G4 logistics with the artillery. So the artillery, for some reason, they loved me, and I enjoyed being in the artillery world. And so I was told I made history being the 1st logistics officer to go through 2 major units and then become the G4 of all artillery across both regular force and reserves. So I felt honored with that, and so every year I join up and I joined the annual 1RCHA reunion that's held annually in Trenton.
You know, like I say to every member of the armed forces that I have the pleasure of meeting, thank you for your service, and to the other members of the military who give so willingly to protect Canada, you know, bless them all and thank them all. You and I have talked, whether it's downstairs or whether it's having a coffee, about the state of this country of ours that we both love. And I kind of understand, after talking to you, the logistics as why President Trump is so bound and determined to not only take Greenland, but also to take the Panama Canal. But to do what he's doing to Canada makes no sense to me. You know, why does he want Canada so bad that he's willing to totally devastate our economy in order to get what he wants? And what is it that he wants?
Well, in my opinion, strong opinion, in following everything that's going on in today's bizarre world, as I call it, what is the main objective, and what is the root of everything that Donald Trump stands for? Money. Donald Trump is a businessman, and it's money. And what is it that he's after? Basically, the countries that he's identified. Greenland. Okay, use it as a strategic point for the military, for its security in North America, right? But what does it also have? It has minerals. What does Canada have? Canada has fresh water, the most abundant amount of fresh water in the whole world. The United States needs fresh water. What else do we have? We have natural resources and minerals in the ground, such as uranium. Very useful. Why is he after Panama? He's after Panama because I fully agree with him.
Hold on. You fully agree with Donald Trump?
For Panama?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And why is that? Because he must have been briefed by the CIA and the National Security Advisory that China has total control of the Panama Canal in both the east and western regions because they have companies there. And let's be realistic. I spent 4.5 years in Shanghai and set up logistics operations there, which is another story at another time. And I personally know for a fact that only the Chinese People's Liberation Army gets involved in any telecommunications and any installations of any infrastructure of any type and any form, specifically involving logistics on a global scale. So, in a nutshell, the two companies that are operating in Panama Canal on both the western side and eastern side, they've got heavy-duty military personnel working in there. And it's not just intelligence either. It's basically operations personnel. So Trump probably got a hold of that information, and that's why he wants total control back. And he's openly stated that he wants to take the control away from the Chinese and to bring it under the American control. So there's that. And if I look at the global picture, having been to 58 countries throughout, and getting an understanding of how things are with the Chinese, China has signed bilateral agreements with Djibouti that they will provide all the infrastructure and build their highways and network, etc. And in reciprocation that they're allowed to have a naval base there. So people ask, why would they have that? And I've been saying this to our government officials as well. I says, beware. China's objective is to set up a naval base in that region so they can take over and cut off the Suez Canal. Panama Canal, why are they there? I've been saying it earlier for the last 5 years. They're setting up in the Panama Canal because they have a military base where they signed a bilateral agreement with Guyana. Let us have a naval base there so that they can then finally have the final military choke point in the Panama Canal. So what does that give them? That gives them the opportunity to choke off North America and Europe from all supplies, especially the supply chains of all products that come back and forth. And how are they able to do that? 15 years ago, China may have had maybe 2 boats altogether in the Pacific Ocean or the China Sea. Well, it just so happens that the last couple of months, China has surpassed the United States Navy as now the most surface ships and subsurface submarines on the globe.
My guest this hour is Hans Schmidt, Exo Nation. We're going to let you know later on how you can read some of the great articles that Hans has up on LinkedIn. You know, people say, Rob, you know, what President Trump, what he's doing, what's this got to do with UFOs, ghosts, hauntings, things that go bump in the night? Well, here's a shock for you all. There's more to life than UFOs, ghosts, and things that go bump in the night. This is very important because it affects every one of us, believers and skeptics alike. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. www.xzbn.net is our network, and you can listen to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, and that is Chilliwack with Arms of Mary. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, and, of course, on all major social media platforms, X Zone, Radio, TV, and of course, our newest one is we're up on X, Twitter, that one that I used to say, I'll never get on X. I'll never, well, I guess I should never say never because, yes, I'm there now. And it's nice meeting a whole bunch of new people. Mind you, I've tried to friend Elon Musk, but nothing yet. Patience is a virtue. My guest this hour is my good friend Hans Schmidt, former member of Canada's military. He has a lot of great things to say. And how can people read your LinkedIn articles, Hans?
Well, they can read my LinkedIn articles on mostly the comments and the articles that I put out there. It's predominantly articles that deal with logistics and the logistics environment and global logistics. And then I also put my comments down on certain, I'm going to say, articles and pages or posts that people put in that are political, even though I'm mostly against the political input within LinkedIn. But I do also put in on Facebook under my name.
Something I've noticed about your articles, they make sense. Most of the articles that are posted on social media sites, they make no sense, and people have an ulterior motive, but your articles are filled with facts. They're filled with the truth. And you usually don't see that on social media platforms. It's quite refreshing. You and I were talking earlier, and we were talking about, we were talking about the military. We were talking about the carbon tax, and you were saying that if Mark Carney?
Correct.
If he gets in, he was talking about, what was it, that the price of gas would increase $2.70 a liter?
You're absolutely right with that one, Rob.
That's...
I have to chuckle. I've been following Mark Carney when he was the Bank of Canada governor, and then moved over to the UK and became the governor of the Bank of England. His policies weren't all that great for the Bank of England, which is one of the reasons that after Brexit, or right at Brexit time frame, he resigned, because his policies were not accepted by the UK government or regime, because it was against, or if you want to call it the opposite of the Brexit policies that were being worked on. He came back to Canada, from my understanding, because we have relatives over in the UK, and they're pretty high up there in the financial world. He came back to Canada because there was not one single Fortune 500 company, financial firm, that was interested in hiring him, because they knew of his background and his policy, plus his association with the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the Green Foundations, and all that he was with, because he was actually advocating and pushing for all this climate and net zero, and that, which didn't make any sense. But if you look down, he went off to this firm that he was with, the venture firm, and he's a liberal elite. Okay, and I'm just going to rhyme off that. Carney seems to be more interested in supporting dirty dictators and supporting their oil from those dirty dictators, such as Iran, Russia, Venezuela. And he supports clean without supporting any clean and responsible Canadian energy. So not only hypocritical, but also I call it for his own self-serving purpose and self-benefits. Because he wants to really cripple Canada's energy sector, driving investment, jobs, and business overseas. And why is that? Because he's been pushing Trudeau, when he was as acting advisor, economic advisor, to increase the carbon tax levels. He said the rates were too low. And as you were saying earlier, he basically stated, and this is fact, folks, stated that the Canadian public and citizens need to be punished for their gas emissions and carbon emissions. So therefore, the fuel, the gasoline carbon tax should be increased by $2.70 above today's regular prices, which would bring the liter of fuel up to at least $5 or more per liter. Now, why is that? Carney seems to be telling everybody he's axing the consumer carbon tax, and then he'll be replacing it with another green initiative.
He's starting to sound a lot like Elon Musk.
Not really.
No?
Elon Musk, he's currently on that venture of identifying waste and misappropriation of government funding, of which Carney basically seems to be doing the opposite. He's been benefiting, for example, as the government economic advisor to Trudeau and Freeland. He convinced them to give his firm, the funding for their investment pension funds. So he's got a few $1 billion. I don't want to say the exact number because the exact number changes so often. So it's basically as if somebody's pulling it out of the air, the number. But he made a healthy commission and a bonus on top of that. Then on top of that, I mean, I call it grafting at its best. His wife magically, her company that she works with, magically got a contract by the federal government. And it's a multi-million-dollar contract. And she seemed to have gotten a nice bonus right thereafter, after receiving this contract. So you have to wonder, here's a guy that comes back to Canada from overseas, doesn't have anything to do with anybody, becomes the advisor to the Prime Minister, gets his firm to receive billions of dollars, and then his wife's company magically gets a contract. So, as far as I'm concerned, he's worse than Trudeau when it comes to self-benefits on the taxpayer's back. So again, as Carney points out during all his campaign and all that, the carbon credit market is already oversupplied. In Alberta, for example, the carbon credit price was $47 per ton in November, much less than the official 80 tons carbon price that was originally set. So by adding a consumer credit onto the market, this will increase the supply to an already saturated market. What does that mean? To deal with the problem, Carney promises much stricter emission standards than are currently in place. With more emissions subject to tax, carbon credits get soaked up, eventually raising the fuel prices. Though it is not officially a tax, the scheme will have the same effect on consumers and businesses as the fuel charge, also known as the carbon tax. So, Rob, what he's doing is he's flim-flamming everybody. He's only saying to the people, I'm going to axe a tax, as Polyev calls it. But in actual fact, he's got this hidden agenda where once he's elected, should he be elected in, he's going to whammy the Canadians. And you think we're suffering now? Carney gets in, pushes all this through. We ain't seen nothing yet. There'll be an awful lot more homeless, and there'll be an awful lot more people that will not be able to afford to heat their homes, let alone fuel up their vehicles and go back and forth to work.
So costs are going up. The cost of living on a daily basis is going to be going up. The cost of gasoline is going to be going up. And everything else stays the same. So how are the Canadians supposed to make ends meet with the cost going up and everything else staying the same?
Well, that's just it. I mean, deep down, first of all, I have no political affiliation with any party.
Yep.
I mean, I've had the Conservatives come after me. I've had the Liberals come after me. I've had the NDP. I call them the nickel and dime party now because their leader, he's the biggest flip-flopper that exists on the face of the earth. In reality, do we have any real true leaders here in Canada right now? Not really.
No.
I mean, if they say Carney is supposed to be in the latest Nanos poll, they say Carney, the majority of the people, I mean, not majority, I'm going to say 40% I'm going to use factual numbers. 40% of the Canadians that submitted to the Nanos poll say they're more comfortable in Carney dealing with Trudeau. Wrong. I mean, not Trudeau, with Trump. That's an absolute wrong. Trump has gotten rid of the DEI. He's gotten rid of any minorities within the federal departments. He detests anybody on the LGBTQ advocacy groups and any other groups that are with gender equality, because he just passed the law and the executive order that only men and women, male and females, are identified as the genders. So now, if you take a look at everything that Trump has just signed for economic orders, it goes against everything that Carney and Trudeau stand for. And unfortunately for the NDP, you had Jagmeet Singh supporting everything that the Liberals have been pushing through. And in some cases, the Bloc have also supported, where the Conservatives were against it. And so you have to look at it and say, right, who is really going to be the best person to deal with Trump? Poilievre may have an edge because he's a conservative, because he wants to axe the taxes. And by the way, we're the only population across the globe or around the globe that are paying a carbon tax. So you have to wonder, we have an emissions of 0.14%. We have an abundance of trees. We have over billions of trees that soak up all the, I'm going to say, the emissions that are out there.
Right.
So realistically, we have a net zero just from the trees. So if I look back and reflect on what's happening with all this carbon tax money that's being collected, well, when I checked into it, it goes into a green slush fund. That green slush fund, which is the $400+ billion that goes in there, it magically is allocated to 3 or 4 different companies. And you wouldn't believe this, but it just so happens that our environment minister and the prime minister are heavily invested in 2 of these companies where all this money goes into.
And the plot thickens, and we'll be back on the other side of this short break as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, and a special guest this hour is Hans Schmidt. And Hans and I will be back on the other side as we continue talking about, well, politics, I guess we can call it that. Or BS, as we can call it. I don't know anymore. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Rob McConnell here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, and you're listening to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming at classic1220.ca. Welcome back, everyone. That's Michel Pagliaro, another Montrealer. Loving you ain't easy. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell. You're listening to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming around the world on classic1220.ca. We're talking politics this hour because, as I said at the beginning of tonight's show, there is more to life than UFOs, ghosts, things that go bump in the night. And here's something to think about, okay, guys? You're a little alien in your flying saucer, and you're scooting around the universe, and this little blue planet, third rock from the sun, grabs your attention. And you figure, I like the color blue. Let's see what's going on down there. Can you just imagine them listening in and watching what's going on this planet? You have the wars. You have the famine. You've got the weather. You've got everything that an alien wouldn't want, unless you're from Mexico, Guatemala, or anywhere like that. That's why I decided, we're going to skip the UFOs for tonight and get into reality. Because, reality is much more interesting than fiction at times. And when we're talking about what's going on in today's world with President Trump and then our people in Ottawa, and then, of course, with Trump wanting to turn the Gaza Strip into a Riviera of the Mediterranean, he wants to take over Canada, he wants to take over Greenland, and he also wants to take over now a country in South Africa, I'm told. And let's not forget the Panama Canal. Now, if anybody can tell me why an alien would want to be interested in making contact with us is something that they'd want to do, please tell me, because all they need to do is look at the best of this planet and say, hey, no intelligent life here. Whoop, let's go. Or they say, hey, this will be an easy takeover, and they take the planet over. So I've asked a friend of mine, Hans Schmidt, to come over tonight and try and help me make sense of what in the name of heavens is going on in this world of ours, Bill. Help me out here, Bill.
Well, Rob, if I just look down at the changes that's happening, with Trump reversing all the decisions of the Biden administration, as well as all the what was implemented by the liberals, I can only imagine why he's after Canada, because he's openly said he does not like Trudeau. And Trudeau's been pushing everything and implementing everything in Canada what Trump is against. And if we look at it, it was about a month ago where the government tried to hide all the expenditures of all our tax money that went overseas.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for them, there were two people that held on and got these documents released. And I managed to get a hold of one.
Really?
And I've got it here in front of me, Rob, and I can understand why the government's hiding them. This is taxpayers' money.
All right, let's spill the beans. Let's spill the beans, Bill.
Okay, $50 million went to Mozambique for the support to education in Mozambique.
How much?
50 million Canadian dollars.
Were there the purchase of any condoms in that?
No, but on top of that, they then sent an additional 17 million to Mozambique for advancing the quality education and school-related sexual and reproductive health and rights.
All right, there's where the condoms are.
That's right.
Okay, let's play it safe. Okay.
And then to Mali. For the government of Mali, in support of the health sector, 20 million. Now, we all know a war was going on there, and it was the guerrillas that were taking it. Yeah. So did the money actually get to them? I doubt it.
Probably went to the orangutans.
Again, an additional 20 million was also then pumped in, so a total of 37 million to the government of Mali. And then for the sectoral budget support in sexual and reproductive health in Mali, an additional $17,819,041.
That was for the condoms.
Condoms in a war zone. Now figure that. It's in a conflicted country.
Well, I understand that if they're using the rubber in order to make a highly advanced weapon called a slingshot, it might work.
Exactly, but let's be realistic. The last part I want to point out here is the $75 million to Tanzania. Okay. 75 million to strengthen Tanzania's primary financial sector. Now,
they manufacture condoms. No?
Now, let's be realistic, okay? What I've read off here is we're talking at least about $400 million worth. Okay,
that's a lot of condoms, yeah.
Out of that $400 million, let's reflect back reality what's happening today.
Okay.
We have a homeless population growing across Canada.
Yep.
We have over 2 million people using the food banks per month.
That is.
We have food programs in schools because they say 60% of the children going to school today go to school hungry because they don't have decent meals. Why is that? Because of the taxation. The taxation that is being put on everybody, and I'm just talking, not just talking federal level, I'm talking provincial level and municipality. The City of Toronto just increased their taxes by another 6.9%. And then the water in the sewage is also being increased. Now, this is my belief because I've been to the world. I've been to all the OPEC countries aside from Canada. All the other countries within the OPEC nations, the majority of them do not collect taxes from their citizens. They live off the oil royalties or the natural gas royalties or the royalties of all their natural resources. Now, Canada being one of the countries on this globe that has a lot, an abundance of resources, oil and liquid natural gas, I always question, why do we have to pay such exorbitant amount of taxes in this country? Well, my answer is because we have a bunch of clowns who don't know how to manage money up in the top and who don't know how to manage, or I'm going to say provide the proper requisite governance for a country. So we realistically are no different than the United Arab Emirates. We're no different than the Kuwaitis or the Omaris,
Right.
or those from in Bahrain that are oil-rich countries, or Russia for that matter, okay, or Venezuela. All those countries, they've all gone into turmoil like Russia and Venezuela because they have dictators there. So go back to Carney. Carney accepts oil from Venezuela, accepts oil investments anyway, investments in Venezuela and Russia and all that, but yet he's strongly against any oil production here in Canada, same as Trudeau. What we need to do here in Canada is we need to open up and build the pipelines to go east and west, to go into North British Columbia or North Vancouver to hit the ships there so they can feed the Asian countries. Out east from Alberta all the way across to Nova Scotia so they can load up on the ships with the liquid natural gas and oil there, instead of having to pay $460 billion for Saudi oil coming in. It makes no sense. We can create 100,000 jobs by sending off the oil. And what really, is asinine, to say the best word to use, is when Trudeau declined to sell our oil and natural gas to Germany, Japan, and Greece. Japan just signed a huge multi-billion-dollar agreement and contract with Trump for liquid natural gas. Germany and Greece signed huge multi-billion-dollar contracts with Qatar for liquid natural gas, which could have all come to Canada. And if you talk about the billions of dollars in liquid natural gas alone, that would be equivalent of over 100,000 jobs created here in Canada, as well as money going across all major provinces. So it's not just one.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, what are our politicians doing? But they seem to be more interested in making sure that the Governor General gets a pay raise of $15,000, where yet she is the most useless Governor General has ever had. And that's another story I can tell you. From the aid, the camps, friends of mine that were with the Governor General on the actual abuse of spending taxpayers' money. And I'll give you one quick example. She spent $100,000 for a limousine service in Iceland to travel, believe it or not, 300 to 400 meters from the hotel to where she wanted to go to the venue and back again. 100,000 Canadian dollars spent on that. And that's on top of the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent for the catering services that they had to buy and put on the aircraft so she can feed her friends and show off with lavish meals and that on the airplane.
Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. So, in summary, the money that is wasted and sent out to foreign countries all for the wrong reasons while we are suffering here at home, excuse me, that could all be changed, where we could have a country where the tax base could be 3% for everybody across the board. Yeah, if they want to increase it to the high spenders or the high earners, they could do so, but I would say ex-nay against that. 3% across the board for everybody, and then the government can live off the royalties, off of the natural resources that are put out there, and forget about the deficit, because the deficit will be paid off.
All right, Bill, stand by. You and I have to take our final break. Fascinating. Didn't know you were getting that ripped off that much, did you, Canada? Well, you are. And then, you know, what really picks me off is that the seniors basically are on fixed incomes now. They can't afford a lot of things. They can't afford proper meals, God bless them. And their CPP and their OAS is taxed, even though the money that they earned when they were working was taxed. You pay tax on top of tax on top of tax on top of tax. And you don't even get a condom. What a ripoff. Hans and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. From our studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Let me see. Today is the 11th. That means 16 more days before we in Ontario go to the polls. Or the Ukrainians, or the Czechoslovakians, whoever will take us. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
I'm not a Starfleet commander or TJ Hooker. I don't live on Starship NCC-170 or own a phaser. I don't know anyone named Bones, Sulu, or Spock. And no, I've never had green alien sex. But I'm sure it'd be quite an evening. I speak English. And French. Not Klingon. I drink Labatt's, not Romulan ale. And when someone says to me, live, lie, and prosper, I seriously mean it when I say get a life. My doctor's name is not McCoy, it's Ginsburg. And tribbles were puppets, not real animals. Puppets! And when I speak, I never ever talk like every word is its own sentence. But I was raised in Montreal. And yes, I've gone where no man has gone before, but I was in Mexico and her father gave me permission. My name is William Shatner, and I am Canadian.
William Shatner, I am Canadian. Speaking about Canadian, Hans, why don't we just start buying Canadian?
Yeah, you think in today's time with all the tariffs, my personal opinion would be is instead of trying to fight fire with fire, let's do the opposite. Instead of putting tariffs on any products going down to the United States from Canada, we should start looking at our interprovincial barriers. Knock them down. There'd be nothing nicer than having the asparagus that's grown in Quebec flow across Canada into all the other provinces rather than having to buy asparagus from down south Mexico or over from Europe. when we are actually growing asparagus in Quebec, and even the white asparagus that's seasonal going across, or the fruits from the Okanagan Valley to go across, or the wines from the Okanagan Valley, or even from the Niagara region, wines going across Canada, rather than having to rely on the California wines or the Argentinian wines or the European wines, when we can actually ship our own across Canada. The maple syrup going across Canada. Let's knock all these barriers down and across the interprovincial barriers. And forget about the tariffs and just let the people buy Canadian and have that opportunity. There are so many entrepreneurial folks out there that started businesses that would benefit, as well as the people buying, the consumers that are buying the products from these companies, so they don't have to rely on having to purchase American goods.
Well, what's the purpose of the interprovincial taxation system anyway? Who gets that money, and what's that money used for?
Well, take a look at the LCBO. In Ontario, you have the LCBO.
Right.
And in Quebec, you have the Quebec Liquor Control Boards.
Right.
And the other provinces, you have the provincial liquor control boards in all the provinces. They all want to collect their money. It's no different than Ontario. The beer companies, Molson's, Labatt's, they have the so-called regulations in place that a beer can only be sold for X dollars. Yet, you go to the LCBO and you can buy a European beer for half the price of a Canadian beer. Yet the European beers are stronger than the Canadian beers, and they even taste better because the European beers, they can't put preservatives or any chemicals into them, such as they're allowed to do here in Canada. So you have to ask yourself, why does a homegrown Canadian beer cost more than a European beer?
Taxes.
Exactly. What we need to do, in addition to the knocking down the barriers, interprovincial barriers for trade, is knock down the municipal taxes, the provincial taxes, and the federal taxes. Make it competitive for the companies. We have such a huge, or we've had, and still are having a huge brain drain from Canada because of our taxes. We have a lack of investment, a lack of innovation going through. Why? Because of taxes. And I think you said it once before there, Rob. I mean, we are taxed to death. We have tax upon tax upon tax.
That's right.
And we're probably the only country to have a death tax where when you die, your so-called beneficiaries have to fill out the tax forms to pay the tax on your death.
You see, I think that if any of the people who are trying to become our prime minister, if they were to use common sense and actually look and see what the problems are instead of the bull crap that they try to feed Canadians, and we're not as gullible as our politicians think we are. You know, take care of, like, I'm stuck on the seniors because I can't understand why I should pay tax on my old age security or Canada pension plan when I've already paid tax on it once before.
Which brings me back to what I was saying earlier. The other OPEC nations, give an example. Kuwait, they pay the equivalent of $140,000 US. Now we're going back into the early 2000s here, so it's probably a heck of a lot more today. Mm-hmm. But these are factual numbers that were given to me from the government officials because I basically liaised with the government officials in Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. So the equivalent of $140,000 US per person, per citizen of the country. No taxes. So if you take a look at here in Canada, if the government lived off the royalties and had a 3% tax base, they could include that seniors and veterans would be able to receive their pensions tax-free, with no taxes having to be paid. There would not be a requirement for the HST on top of a GST. And let's be honest about the carbon tax. I mean, that's a senseless, useless tax. That's just a tax scam for the government to collect money. to pay off the $1 billion worth of monthly debt payments and interest payments they have to pay off. So all that is blowing smoke up everybody's rear end instead of telling the truth. But you cut down the taxes, the companies will come. Yes, you give incentives, the companies will grow. They will create jobs. Jobs are created in the economy, and this is what a lot of people don't understand. We have to have an economy, and an economy is driven by manufacturing, not by the service industry, but by manufacturing.
Right.
So we have to basically bring back onshore what we offshored for that 40 cents to the dollar, which was a Chinese scheme of getting the investment money into China at the expense of reducing and turning all the Western countries into service countries, basically, so that they have a monopoly on all the manufacturing and the OEMs, as it's called. So we do that, the companies will come, the jobs will be created, but you need a government that's going to push it. And you need a government that instead of being self-serving, because after all, constituents, why do we vote these people in? We vote these members of parliament in, or these candidates to become a member of parliament, because they're supposed to serve us, not serve themselves.
Right.
Well, the new government that's to be elected, what they need to do is they need to turn around and say, you know what, we're gonna make our pensions the same as everybody else. And that calculation process is 2% per year for 35, so that the maximum eligible you would get is 70% of your best salary of your last 5 years of employment, which is what every other person gets across the board in Canada. And I know that's how they do the calculations for the Canadian Forces personnel. So the government members of parliament, even the provincial members, should not be any better off or different per se, and that's why Jagmeet Singh is basically voting in favor of everything for the Liberals, because he's got 2.7 million reasons why he has to stay in till mid-term of midsummer of this year in order that he qualifies for that 2.7 million pension. Well, that's hogwash as far as I'm concerned. So you see, you have the pension incentive dictating to the person to only care for themselves and not care for the country. And that's why we have the flip-flopping NDP leader who's supporting. On one side, he's telling everybody, oh, Trudeau must go, the Liberals must go, but yet on the other side, he's supporting them so that he can collect his pension, which is a joke as far as I'm concerned.
In your opinion, who is giving Canada right now, and I know it's not a big choice here, who's giving the Canadians the best opportunity of bringing this country out of the mess it's in?
Right now, the only I'm going to look at it collectively as a party.
Yep.
Like I said earlier, I've got no affiliation with any party, and I'm not going to endorse any parties or anything. But looking at the pros and the cons and the facts of everything behind it, right now, the only party that could bring us out of this trouble is the Conservative Party. If Carney gets in with the Liberals, they're going to continue on their path. They're elitists. They don't give a rat's behind about the Canadian constituents. They've proven that they're not there to serve the constituents, but to only serve themselves.
Right.
The NDP party, the New Democratic Party, I call it the nickel and dime party because their leader has basically nickel and dimed his own party into the doldrums, and I understand they did a recent poll of his riding,
right,
and he's running in third or fourth place.
Oh my God!
So he's not going to be reelected, and he knew that, and that's why he stalled to stay on, because he knows his days are numbered as a politician. I mean, he's useless, has proven to be useless. And you don't flip-flop the way he has. He's identified that he's not a politician. He's just, as far as I'm concerned, a lowlife for his constituents. So the Conservatives...
we've got about 15 seconds.
Yeah. Green Party...
Elizabeth May?
Elizabeth May by herself can't do anything to improve anything because she's all by her lonesome self. She has no one else behind her. And the Bloc, well, they're only interested in Quebec. They couldn't care less about the rest of Canada. So basically, that leaves just the Conservative Party.
Hans, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hey, we'll have to do this more often, pal, because this is reality. And I know that reality isn't as sensationalistic as expecting the UFOs to land on the White House lawn and take President Trump away with them. But this is reality. And Hans, thanks very much for joining us,
No
my
problem.
friend.
But if I may just add on.
We'll be back on the other side of this break as hour number 2 commences right now here in the X-Zone on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, classic1220.ca.
The gales of northern